All right, so we're here on the debut episode of Couch Coach Live presents Round the Draft. We're going to be going through just topics throughout the NFL draft up until the draft in April. So we're here tonight. We're going to discuss the quarterbacks, and of course, I got my Off the Ball Network colleague, aka the quarterback whisperer, as I affectionately call him, my guy Stu. What's going on, Stu? How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm good, man. How are you?
Everything's great, man. And before we get started, I know, we're really supposed to be concerned with the NFL draft, this current class of 2021, but we got to kind of go back in the day. We got to talk about the number 2 overall quarterback in the 2016 draft. And Christmas has came early for you, too. As people may not know, you're an Indianapolis Colts fan, and Carson Wentz is in Indy. So, man, your thoughts on Carson Wentz landing in Indy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a little bit on cloud nine. I think just the fact that like I mean, like what I like to call it, we gave up a box of cookies and a bag of chips to get Carson Wentz, is exciting to me. But I think having some time, a few hours now to let it sit down. You do have to take in consideration the way he played last season. Yeah, the questions are like, is he mentally broken? But I do think that, if there's a place that's going to turn him around, if there's a coach that can do it, it's Frank Reich, because he did it in 2017, and Carson Wentz was an MVP caliber quarterback. But yeah, I mean, right now I'm on cloud nine. We got our franchise quarterback, and we didn't have to mortgage the franchise to do it.
Absolutely. That's one thing we talked about earlier where, yeah, right, you see how other teams have been essentially doving out multiple picks and multiple assets for that. And like you said, this is kind of a situation, so that's definitely, great for you guys. So, and then, of course, you have your quarterback, your franchise quarterback. And then, we got T-Law coming. Trevor Lawrence, maybe, more than likely is going to be the number 1 overall pick. I'm going to Jacksonville. So Trevor Lawrence had this. I guess you would consider that a pro day, even though
it was his pro day. He did it early because he's having that left shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
So that's why he did it early. But yeah, it was his pro day. They're not doing the combine this year.
Yeah.
So since they're not doing the combine, they have to do it with, they have to do the pro days, which is okay, but also kind of sucks because some of the lower guys don't get to go to the combine. And so, we'll see.
And, and we talked about how we say, so during, in that, the Clemson, T-Law's essentially with Trevor Lawrence, and he stopped, doing that, but Trevor Lawrence's pro day. Did you see anything that you really haven't seen in the past 3 years? Anything that kind of stuck out in that pro day?
No, I mean, he's a guy that every draft person you listen to, I mean, he's the best prospect since Andrew Luck. I mean, it's hard to find any flaws for him. I mean, there are some, but there's very, very little. And, pro days are meant to make you look good. They're meant to make you look great because you're not playing against the defense. You don't have to recognize things. You're throwing on the air with guys that you're usually comfortable throwing the ball with. And that's what Trevor Lawrence did. And Lawrence looks great, and he looked great. I mean, I think unless he came out and completely just stunk up the joint, I think that would have been a time where they're like, okay, well, maybe. But other than that, I mean, I don't think there was much he could have done to mess up his spot of being the number 1 quarterback in this draft. And I honestly don't think, like, we'll talk about my quarterback too, that's on the list, but I mean, I think there's a gap between 1 and 2.
Absolutely. And it's funny now. And it's weird. I used to hate these things about the draft, but now it's like I like it because it's weird. Because there was an article the other day that was talking about, a lot of people are looking at the kid from BYU, Zach Wilson, as the de facto, like he's better than Trevor Lawrence, and that's why I like it right around this time of year where we always have these type of kind of, I wouldn't say innuendos, but kind of like smoke screens. So your thoughts on smoke screens at this point?
I don't know if they are smoke screens. Like what you'll see a lot of times in these articles are these reporters talk to a GM or a scout of a team, and you may talk to one GM. He may have talked to the GM of the Dolphins, right? I am just bringing that up as an example, and he may have said, we like Zach Wilson better. Well, I mean that like fits their offense better, so they may like Zach Wilson better. It doesn't mean that like that's the overall like thought process of every GM in the league. And so a lot of times, like when they say that, they're probably telling the truth because like the GM that they talk to or the NFL executive that they talk to probably does have Zach Wilson higher or Justin Fields or Trey Lance higher than Trevor Lawrence, but it doesn't mean that that's the overwhelming majority. And a lot of times, I mean, for instance, right? Obviously, Ryan Pace had Mitchell Trubisky higher than he had Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. You don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but I mean, all it takes is one DM to fall in love with one quarterback over another, and it's not that hard to talk yourself into it. And a lot of times, that's what GMs do, and that's what happens come this draft time. People start falling in love with guys, and sometimes they oversee their flaws.
Yeah, and also I think, and it's weird, and it kind of we talk about this too. I think this might potentially help the Jets in a sense where if, say, for instance, you hear that and you're like, okay, well, I can get Wilson at this point, and then hey, the Jets, you want to trade out because I don't know how you feel about Sam Darnold. I don't know if you want to get somebody else at that pick or what have you. So it definitely kind of help their value.
Yeah, and I don't know how the Jets feel about Sam Darnold, but I've been saying it. I've talked about it on my show. I've talked about it on Jeff's. I've talked about it a lot. That if I'm the Jets, there's only one quarterback I give up Sam Darnold for, and that was Trevor Lawrence. And now that you're not going to get him, I go Penei Sewell there at 2. And if you can't get there and you get a really, really good offer from a team like maybe Atlanta or Carolina or somebody who wants to jump up to go get Zach Wilson, then I say you make that deal. But for me, if I'm the Jets, I don't take the quarterback at 2 because I think Sam Darnold's the guy. But again, I'm not the GM. I don't know what they're thinking, but that's what I would be thinking is, Penei Sewell would be the number 2 overall pick if I was picking for the New York Jets. And then, I mean, what do you got to lose? If Sam Darnold has another bad year, you're still paying him a rookie contract, and next year you can get a guy like Sam Howell or a Spencer Rattler who's going to be really, really good.
Yeah. The 2021 Heisman Trophy winner, which I'll put that in the air, Sam Howell by
my pick.
UNC stand up. So yeah, and I definitely agree with you on that as far as the Jets getting Penei Sewell. I've been saying that too as well. 'Cause I'm like, you coupled with Mekhi Becton, they're interchangeable parts on the offensive line, and hell, you can build off of those guys. And like you said, if it's bad, you can get another quarterback in 2022, and and what have you. You have that type of flexibility, that type of option.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And people talking about like what position does Penei Sewell play, and like is he a left? Does he play left or right? Like he plays the same position as Mekhi Becton. Okay, so like move him to the left side, move him to the right side. Like the point is like tackle still tackle. I understand that like I never played offensive line, so I can't speak for like the offensive line, but I still know that like at the end of the day, some of the basics are still some of the basics. And if you're as good of a prospect as Penei Sewell is, to me, it's a no-brainer. I would take Penei Sewell. And then you have plus they have a second first-round pick as well already. So, I mean, I could see them going 2 offensive linemen in this draft, shore up that offensive line. Miami's kind of set the precedent. They just got to look in their own division as to what you got to do to build a winner. And, Miami's really turned it around. But, yeah, I get that all the time. It's like, well, him and Mekhi Becton play the same position. And it's like, okay, well, move one to the other side. Like you're going from protecting the right side to the left side or the left side to the right side. It's not that I don't think there's that big of a difference in the NFL.
Thank you. And I said the same thing because it's like, right. And it's just like with those two, you figure it out. They both are plug and play. You figure it out,
Yeah. I mean, it's different, right? So like, I'll give you an example. Like the Colts, Anthony Constanzo left. He played left tackle. Quentin Nelson plays guard. Now, there's a bit of a difference between guard and tackle. I still think Quentin Nelson could play tackle if they want to move him there. That's what some people have suggested. But Quentin Nelson's the best guard in football, so I think you should keep him at guard. And like that's the difference. If he was playing now, I wouldn't have a problem if he was going from left guard to right guard because like it's still the guard position. But left tackle to right tackle is no big deal. So I mean that's my thought process on it. To have him and Makai, to have Penei Sewell and Makai Becton on the same offensive line, those are some cornerstone offensive alignment you're going to have for the next decade. That no matter who your quarterback is, whether it's Sam Darnold or whoever else, I mean they're gonna thank the GM of the Jets for making that pick.
Absolutely. So now the question is, and this is always, I think this is now in this draft, this is probably the number one question is who is QB2 in the class of 2021 quarterback class?
For me personally, it's Justin Fields. And I'm going to ask that everyone please stop mocking Zach Wilson above Justin Fields in your mock drafts because Justin Fields is clearly the second best quarterback. And listen, I love Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson is going to have a great NFL career, and I think he's going to play for the next 10 to 15 years. But here's the thing, Coach. I think that at the end of the day, there are two different guys. I mean, I said coming into the year, this was a 2-horse race, and even said that, Justin Fields may, at the end of the season, depending on how he plays, push Trevor Lawrence for the number 1 overall pick. It was a 2-horse race. It was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and then there was everybody else. Justin Fields had the Indiana game was bad. The Northwestern game was bad. But, I think that, to me, there is a gap between Lawrence and Fields, but then there's a gap between Fields and the rest of the field. So, I mean, even though there's a gap between Lawrence and Fields, I think the gap between Fields and number 3 is larger than the gap between Fields and Lawrence, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And like you said, and that's how it was in the beginning. And then also just as a progression as the season. So yeah, I definitely agree with that one because, like you said, it's, and like you said, and even in the games where he struggled, these weren't, they were great teams. I mean, they were.
And I also think that all of his mistakes, listen, I think the thing that Fields does is he hangs on to the ball too long. You saw that in Indiana when he was getting pressure. He had never gotten pressured the way he got pressured versus Indiana in his entire career at Ohio State. So this is the first time we watched him play pressure, and he panicked and he threw some picks, and it was a bad football game. I get that. And, he holds on even in the game against Clemson where everyone was like, Justin Fields, resurrected himself. He even played there were times where he had open guys, but he was hanging on to one read way too long. But all these mistakes that I'm talking about are mistakes that can be coached and mistakes that, I mocked him in my mock draft going to Atlanta. That to me would be the perfect spot for him to sit behind a guy like Matt Ryan because the Falcons can't get rid of him for another year anyways, or they're going to eat a huge salary cap burden that they can't afford to eat. So, they'll keep Matt Ryan. If he sits behind a guy like Matt Ryan, I think that's the best possible scenario for a guy like Justin Fields. I talked about this with Jeff. I mean, you see it with Tua, right? Like I like Tua coming out, but Tua had some things that he didn't do well, and you saw it when he got pressured. He fell back on those things he did in college that he didn't do well. And if Justin Fields goes to a team like Carolina or he goes to a team like Detroit, where he's going to be maybe not Detroit now, but if he goes to a place like Carolina where he gets asked to be the day one guy, I think the problem is he may fall back on some of those holding onto the ball too long, the making the one read thing, which still could be coached and doesn't mean that he's going to be a bust. But I think that if he sits a season, I think, or even half a season, those things are going to be reduced significantly, and you will see the quarterback that I've been telling people for the last however many months has been 1B until this season, and now he's locked in at 2 in my book.
Yeah, and like you said, I think we kind of need to kind of go back to those days where guys used to sit in the beginning, and it's funny because it used to be that way where guys would learn essentially from that system. Like you said, if he can learn from a guy like a Matt Ryan, to kind of that would definitely help his career tremendously. And it's just, especially when you're in a predicament where you are at a team where you really don't have, they're just gonna throw you in the fire. They don't have any ways to help you. So I definitely agree with that. And I think he would be a one out of all, especially that would benefit from, at least, like you said, at least half the season. If the season goes bad, maybe after the bye week of that where we go season that he plays. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. And
Yeah,
and I
and
think
I think the guys that I mean, you talked about it, right? The old way, like Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre, right? Like
yeah,
that's some of those things. I think the guy that I just mentioned, Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, at least in my time, from when I've been following football, were the first ones to really get the start as rookies, and it's
yeah.
kind of been that way since they got drafted, where they don't really sit behind guys anymore. They're kind of asked to come in and play great football like Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco did in their rookie years.
Yeah, and then now, and it's funny, the one who modern day who's set, and it was Patrick Mahomes,
Yeah,
and it's funny how you would think how the NFL is such a copycat league where they would do that now, because you think, okay, well, he's a league MVP, a Super Bowl MVP, he's been to Super Bowl twice. Like, you would definitely think how the NFL is, where it's a copycat league where, hey, let's get let the vet play, and then let him play in garbage time the last the last ending of the season. So yeah.
yeah, and I mean, even as recently as this year, before the doctor punctured his lung, I mean, you saw it with Justin Herbert and Tyrod Taylor, right? I
Yep.
mean, so you saw it there too, and then Justin Herbert kind of took the reins and never looked back. It was kind of like a Brady Bledsoe situation, but I mean, you saw it there. The same thing happened. He sat behind Taylor, and he launched into being an arguably a top 10 quarterback.
Absolutely. So, even though I know you already have a franchise quarterback, and I know Christmas came early for you as well, so in this class of 2021, a quarterback not named Trevor Lawrence, who would you start your franchise with today?
For me, I think it would be Justin Fields. I mean, we just mentioned Justin Fields is the number 2 quarterback in this class, so I think I would be almost lying if I said, or being a hypocrite if I didn't take Justin Fields as the guy that not named Trevor Lawrence to build my franchise with. So I think he's got everything you want. I said coming in, I felt like he was a smaller, better passing version of Cam Newton. And then your question could be like, well, why would you want a smaller Cam Newton? Look at all the hits he took. Well, he's a better passer, so he's not going to be running as much as Cam did. Like, you're seeing some of those things. Like, I watch him run, and I'm like, I see a bit of Cam there, but then I watch him throw, and I'm like, this guy, like, and here's something I talked with Jeff about when he did his highlight show earlier in the week. Was this, people don't know this much, but the Elite 11, the top 11 quarterbacks in high school, go to this camp called the Elite 11, and they compete to be ranked 1 through 11. Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence were the top 2 quarterbacks in that Elite 11 camp. Do you know who won? And it's all about passing. It has nothing to do with throwing or nothing to do with running. Do you know who won that Elite 11 camp?
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields over Trevor Lawrence. So just to tell you what kind of passer he is, he's an elite passer. He's up there with guys like Trevor Lawrence. I just think some of his mistakes are coachable. And if the Colts didn't get Carson Wentz today, I would have been beating on the table for them to trade up and get a guy like Justin Fields.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, most definitely. So this class is kind of like we kind of touched on kind of the certain quarterbacks in this draft class, and we kind of, I want to kind of look at it more from a historical perspective at this point. So we look at the class of 83, other class, even at one point you can say the class of 2012, even this year's quarterback class of 2020 was pretty good as far as historical significance. How do you think this class of 2021 of quarterbacks, how they're going to stack up in history, essentially?
So, like, I mean, going back to 83, it was Elway, Kelly, Marino, and then even some of the guys that were really good that never really panned out to be Hall of Famers. And then you look, to me, the next best is 2004 with Big Ben, Phillip Rivers, and Eli Manning. And then 2012, Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, Kirk Cousins. You had Nick Foles. You had Russell Wilson. I would compare this one to a lot of like the 2018 draft class. I think you're going to see 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. I really do. I don't know where. I don't know who number 5 is, depending on who you like, whether you like Mac Jones or you like Kyle Trask, whoever. There will be 5 going in the first round. I think the top 4 are pretty much locked, and the top 4 are pretty much going to be top 10 picks. I think if any of these quarterbacks, if 1 through 3, Lawrence, Fields, or Wilson were able to come out last year after the season that they had this year, they would all have gone over Joe Burrow, in my opinion, as the number 1 overall pick. I just think that, I understand the season that Joe Burrow had, and I understand what he did at LSU was fantastic, and that's why he became the number 1 overall pick. And he beat Trevor Lawrence head-to-head in the national championship. But at the end of the day, if you had to choose between Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, 10 out of 10 times you're taking Trevor Lawrence. And I would argue 9 out of 10 times you're probably taking Justin Fields. And I would say 7 out of 10 times you're probably taking, Zach Wilson from BYU. So I think this class, if not, and you take Joe Burrow number 1 overall, Tua falls, Justin Herbert falls, Jordan Love probably is a second-round pick. When you look at the end of the day, like this class is loaded, and I would compare it to the 2018 draft. I think you're going to see a lot of guys go in the first round, and some of them may not pan out, but I think you're going to see five quarterbacks go in the first round.
Nice. And actually, it's a great thing because we actually allude to this one. So, who are your top 5 quarterbacks in this class?
Yeah, I mean, one is obviously Lawrence. I mean, I would be off my rocker, I guess, if I didn't say Trevor Lawrence is number 1 overall pick, or the number 1 overall quarterback. I have Justin Fields at 2 for all the reasons I mentioned. I think he's a very elusive runner, a very, very good thrower, underrated thrower of the football, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson's 3. I mean, I think Zach Wilson to me is a guy who can play, and I don't want to do this to him because it's a lot of praise, and it's when you compare him to these people, this is when expectations get put there. But he makes a lot of Patrick Mahomes-esque type throws. Those are the type of throws he makes. The throws where you look at you look at the tape and you're like, you scratch your head because you're like, how did he do that? Like, I haven't seen very many quarterbacks do that. So, I mean, those are the type of throws he makes. And then number 4, I have Trey Lance. The question about Trey Lance is he hasn't played in a year. And, I mean, because he took the year off. And also the one game that they did play for him, he didn't play great throwing the football. He was more of a runner. He didn't throw the ball great. So the question becomes, what are you going to get out of Trey Lance? And then I have Mac Jones at 5 over Kyle Trask. And I go back and forth. You could ask me in an hour who I have, and I'll probably switch it. I go back and forth all the time. I think Mac is a better deep ball thrower. I think Mac does some better, is able to recognize the defense a little bit better than Kyle Trask does, which is why, to me, I gave him the edge at 5 over Kyle Trask. But you can almost say 5A and 5B for Trask and Mac Jones. But my 5 is Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, Lance, and Jones.
Okay, cool. So which middle/late round projected quarterback, who do you see that we can look out for? A guy that I would say maybe maybe a Russell Wilson, a Jalen Hurts, somebody who could probably potentially start this year or make somewhat of an impact on an NFL franchise in 2021.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are going to say Kellen Mond. I'm not a big Kellen Mond guy. I don't see the hype around Kellen Mond. I don't know why people like him so much. I understand he was a Senior Bowl MVP, but I don't like him. If I had to choose, it's a guy who I felt had a lot to prove coming into this year. And hopefully the year off and working with a quarterback coach, he's improved. I think he can be a Dak Prescott type of guy where he comes in at a 4th-round pick and he really steps up and becomes the starting quarterback. And that's Jamie Newman. He did play at Georgia. Then he played, I think, at Vanderbilt. Well,
Wait,
he transferred from Wake Forest and
yeah.
went to Georgia, and then he took the year off because of COVID. I think Jamie Newman's a guy who's going to go in the 4th round, maybe 3rd round, and he's going to be a guy that sits behind somebody who, it could be a Drew Lock, it could be, anybody, and then you look at it, one injury, he steps in and never looks back. Like I think and this is a big if his passing has improved, he could be the guy to me that makes that leap into being, a Dak Prescott type of guy where we see a 4th round quarterback come in and we all put our arms around him and want him to get paid like a franchise guy.
Yeah, man, that's definitely a possibility, especially, like you said, like he could be behind someone, that person gets hurt, and then it's all she wrote. But yeah, man, so yeah.
I'm also a big Ian Book fan from Notre Dame. Do I think Ian Book's going to ever light the world on fire? No, of course not. But could he be a Case Keenum type of quarterback? Sure. And people look at it and they're going to scoff and be like Case Keenum, but Case Keenum went 13-3 and went to an NFC Championship game. So I mean, if the odds are perfect and the team's perfect around Ian Book, I think he could take you to 13-3 and an NFC Championship game or an AFC Championship game. He's not a guy that's going to come in and light the world on fire, but he's a guy who I think is going to have a 10 or 15-year career and going to get a couple chances to start. And he'll be a bridge guy. He'll never be the guy, but he'll be a guy who fills in until they get their guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So definitely appreciate you, Stu, for coming on to the first episode of Round the Draft. We're going to have you around here. So no pun intended. So where can they find you on social media, Stu?
Yeah, it's at StuPock5 on Twitter or at the morning brew. You can also get me on Instagram at Stu Morning as well on Instagram there. And then, SoundCloud's where you can find the podcast along with Spotify, and the podcast is The Morning Brew with Stu.
Nice. Definitely looking forward to it, and definitely looking forward to everything with your write-ups with the draft, leading up to the draft, and definitely appreciate you, our first guest around the draft, and definitely appreciate you, Stu, once again. And let's put a ball in this week's Around the Draft, and we'll catch you guys next week.